All right, welcome everyone to the 11 o'clock talk in the technical track. Let me quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Andreas. I call myself typically an engineer by training, but a designer at heart. I have studied computer science. I've built web apps for a couple of years, switched then to more like designing interfaces and user experience after some time. And at Magnolia, I've been explicitly hired to develop the new UX a couple of years ago, and I'm head of UX there. And my colleague here.
So hi everyone, I'm Mikael. So I've got a little bit more of a web and multimedia oriented background in the first place, slowly shifted towards software development. And I've got a little bit of a crush on good looking UIs and good design in general. So we are both working at Magnolia. So Andreas is head of user experience and myself as a senior software engineer.
But we are actually also both part of what we call the UX team, which is a small group of people consisting of me and a couple of developers, and we try to forward, maintain, and define the user experience. So in this talk, we're going to present you a couple of things. It's about designing and building great apps. I'm going to show you a couple of guidelines that we've developed over the last couple of years. This is more like from the design side. We're going to have a look at a couple of 5.3 features which help you create powerful apps. We have a lot of changes there. And we're going to actually play with an example. So we don't code live, but we're going to look at code. And while doing so, we hope that we also can demonstrate you a little bit how we approach apps, how we design and build them. Which basically brings us to the question as to what we think is a great app. And coming from UX, it sounds more like this. A great app brings value to users. So whenever you design an app, you know who your users are, and you try to somehow build something that helps them do their daily work. A good app, especially in the context of Magnolia, plays well with other apps, which means that it integrates well visually, that it integrates well from a functional perspective as well. It doesn't bring up something entirely new typically. And obviously it should be easy to use and understand. Or this is a couple of images that I've stolen from a talk from a UX colleague recently. This is another way to put it. A good app is a tool that works. Well, it still works, but it's kind of somehow quirky. But which ends up not as being a set or a piece in a set of tools, but placed together well to give a seamless experience. So a decent dish instead of just a collection of freebies. All right, Mika.
So let's see what great app are we going to build. So for today's example, let me introduce you the Photo Scout app. So it's essentially a photo where we have a group of people that we're going to call the Scout. They're going to browse photos stored on Instagram. They're going to look at these photos, find some good ones that they like, that they want to suggest to photo editors. And typically editors will get these suggestions in their task inbox. And they will then decide whether they want to proceed, add them to the assets, for example, and maybe use them on web pages.
Yeah, the first thing that I'm showing you is a storyboard. This is basically a grid of 3x2 small little piecelets. And I'd like to encourage you to, whenever you start designing an app, to think about the flows, to think about what exactly you want to achieve, to model each and every step, not just using the UI, but possibly also using other tools that the customer or that the user is using along the way. The cool thing about this type of grids is that they're so narrow that you have to focus on the essential. You're not going to draw an entire user interface here. You're just going to draw the essential pieces. And that helps you keeping focused on what you actually want to achieve. Grids like these can be found on sites like, I think it's pronounced Konigi, I don't know. There are several other types of grids. And don't worry if you cannot draw. I mean, sketching, everybody can. I'm not a drawer, I'm not a visual artist, I'm not a visual designer. I haven't developed the visual design of Magnolia 5, but drawing, sketching as such, everybody can. So
let's see what we're going to need to fulfill our example. So first we're going to need an app to view the photos. We're going to need for that to find a way to access the photos stored on the Instagram. Then we're going to need an interface to configure which photos we want to see in this browser. And then, yeah, we'll have to see how we can handle these suggestions in the Pulse for photo editors. Ideally, we would also check how to copy these photos to assets, being able also to use these photos in the templates. But yeah, as far as app design and Magnolia 5.3 are concerned, we're only going to focus on the first 4, which is already more than enough to cover in this session.
All right, so let's start designing and building this. This is roughly the 3 pieces that we're going to cover. So the app itself, the configuration, that may be quite familiar to some of you, how we plan to actually capture the settings. And then we're going to have a look at the photos on Instagram and handling of tasks in Pulse. And with the first set, actually, it's mostly about design. So the question you should ask yourself first if you want to build an app for Magnolia is what type of app do I actually want to build? Because there's basically 2 types. And in order to kind of answer these type of questions, we've developed what we call the app design guidelines. And you have received those in your pocket, or I don't know, this kind of mapping thing that you got when you entered here. It's these cards. We have printed out 10 of them. Basically, those take typical questions that you have during development, like what type of message should I use, what type of dialogue should I use, what type of app should I design, and brings it down to the format of a recipe card. I don't know if that existed in your country as well. Here we could, I think it was in the 80s, we could kind of buy magazines and they would contain cards with simple recipes, with very clear recipes on the top and some images in the back, or the other way around. We could collect them and we could end up with a good collection of decent meals. And that's basically the format that we've chosen for the app design guidelines, because we believe that nobody's going to read huge texts, especially not if designing is just a side task that you have to do. These design guidelines are available online. This is just a very narrow version of it. I encourage you to go there. I encourage you to also comment on them to see where we can do better. So let's play our first card then, which is about choosing the right app type. So there's basically 2 types of apps that you can build in Magnolia. One is the content app and one is the custom app. The custom app gives you all the flexibility you need. You can come up with any type of UI that you want. The content app, on the other hand, is great for managing custom data. So if you already have stuff like a contact that we have here as an example, building a content app around it means that you get the create, rename, update, delete methods out of the box. You get a picker, a chooser UI, which you can use from templates in order to access data inside your app, and you get a browser interface basically for free. And this is why for this case here especially we're going to just use a content app, because it's doing everything we need and we know we integrate and play well with others. Second question that I would like to ask before we start to do anything is how we're actually going to configure the feed. There's no such way as a general global settings app or something in Magnolia typically, and we would like to do that inside the app. And there's something called the small app concept or layout in Magnolia, which has been specifically designed to provide information and a UI for tools. So this here is an example from the About app. It just shows the current version of the installed instance and the environment it runs in. Here is an example from the Mail Tools app that is a small tool, or 2 tools actually, underneath each other, which allow you to verify whether the mail settings are working well or not. And here is a small form that allows you from the same app, actually, that allows you to enter the mail settings. So this is exactly this type of format with this light column in the middle and a form that we're going to use also in our case. We'll use it to define what type of photos to get from Instagram. So if I sum this up, I'll end up with a mock-up roughly like this. This is built using a tool called Balsamic Mockups, which I've used extensively when designing Magnolia 5. It's $79. Built by an Italian company, very cool. You can use text to just create interfaces quickly. So this is a content app showing you a set of images, photos from Instagram using a list or a thumbnail view. There is two options, actions on the right-hand side. There is a tab which doesn't close at the top, which offers a small app, uses the small app layout to give you the settings to configure the feed. And Mika is going to show you now how that thing is configured.
Yeah, let's build it. For the time being, we'll mostly focus on the app configuration. So let's go there. I don't have the mirror actually, so I have to look backwards, but first I have to find the mouse again. So here basically we're as super user viewing the configuration. So well, don't mind about the name. It was first called Photo Review, then we renamed it to Photo Scout, but the module is still called Photo Review. Basically, you recognize the basic app configuration. We have sub-apps. We have a browser sub-app, which is the typical sub-app for any content app. And we have the config sub-app that I will detail later on. As a quick refresher, then what we have in a browser sub-app, we have actions so that can perform the selected items. We have an action bar definition to define what structure we want to use, what groups, what availability the actions have. We have also the image provider capabilities and also the workbench where we define which content presenters we want to use, whether we want to display content as tree, as list, or anything else. And what is new in Magnolia 5.3 is the content connector bit here, which I'll come back to this later in this presentation. So that's it for the browser configuration mainly. Now if we take a look at the config sub-app, so it's actually more of a custom sub-app, just inherits the base sub-app. And so it supports actions like any sub-app. Here I've just have a commit action that I'm going to use on a form, because here I'll configure the form definition. Note that this is not out of the box for these kind of small apps. This is kind of custom, so I have a custom sub-app descriptor for this, so that I can configure the form here. It just consists of a switchable field. We're going to be a bit tight here regarding column size. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now if we want to take also a quick insight at the code. So let's go and check in particular that config app, so config sub app. So the sub app just uses a specific presenter. What we see in there with this presenter, it basically starts with the form definition here, and we inject the regular form builder from the UI framework, so we can build the form using the basic UI framework functionality. And as a view, let's take a look at the impl for that view. I've actually implemented the form view interface. This is actually inherited from here. I don't know if I can see that. Yeah, so we have an interface called form view reduced. So I can add fields directly to there instead of using like normal dialog or detail sub-app kind of forms. So the only thing special here is actually we use the small app layout. So that's what is provided by the UI framework. We can, so we don't have to worry about the layout. We just focus on the content. There's a bunch of util like setting the description or adding sections to this layout. And yeah, so here we build the form, and the only thing that that is done more or less in a custom way is the actual commit button here, because I'm not in dialog, so I have to provide the button. So yeah, in that case, I'm just calling the presenter back and save the settings. What this does is just like any other app does it, it's calling an action executor. Same thing here in this presenter, I injected the sub-app action executor. And yeah, I can just execute that action that has got the commit name that we just seen in the configuration. So let's take a quick look at it. I'm gonna log in as myself, so I'm in the role of a photo scout. I'm gonna launch the app, and hopefully there's gonna be some nice pictures from Instagram. So yeah, here they are. So by default, I've used I browsed with the tag Art Basel, which is this famous art fair in Basel that occurred last week. And yeah, so I can just select. I've got the default content app mechanisms behaviors that are granted more or less for free. And yeah, I've got this settings sub app here. I can actually change it. Let's see what we get in mconf 14 for now. Probably not that many, but still, let's look at it anyway. Okay, 4 of them already. Great. So yeah, and here we can also display them as list view. We get access to any kind of data from Instagram. I'll get back to this later on. So back to the presentation.
Okay, you think content apps used to be all about JCR, so they were tied to JCR, and you're going to wonder how exactly you're going to access photos on the matrix. And this is what content connectors are for, which we've introduced in 5.3. Content connectors allow you to connect to any type of data stored anywhere in JCR, in web services, on a database, on a file system. And yeah, let's just have a look. There's not much talk here.
Yeah, not that much. So yeah, I'm sure you're all curious about that. So let's take a first look at the content connector interface. What this does basically, it helps you handle and represent your custom data items as in various specific ways. So first as a string representation, for example, that you can use in the URL fragment. So then you can add favorites to this to one specific node in a content app, for example. Or so it's either URL stringification for URL fragment or item IDs. This is if you're familiar with Vaadin in the container. Well, we identify the items in there with item IDs. This can be a simple POJO or a string or anything. And well, also utils, convenience methods to actually fetch the actual items, the actual Vaadin items. If we take a quick look at the implementation for this content connector in the case of the Instagram thingy, there it is. So first, I've been using a library called Instagram 4J. There's a 4J for everything these days. So it's available on GitHub. And yeah, it pretty much exposes all the utility methods from Instagram's REST API. So at the very beginning of this, it's not, well, okay, no, that's still the content connector. So, well, basically we see the implementation. I'm using actually the same stringification as the item ID itself, which is just a series of numbers separated by an underscore. And yeah, just also fetching items from the container. This is not part of the default content connector interface. I added this Git container here so that I can reuse the container across my different content views. But yeah, typically for JCR, we have different container implementations that are really specified to work with a tree or list or search. So in that case, I'm providing the container here. And the interesting part, then, how the actual access to Instagram is made is within that container. So it's just a basic implementation of a Vaadin container. It extends Vaadin's abstract container. The interesting part is a bunch of things for getting properties, item IDs, etc. I'm using Vaadin bean items, a bit enhanced. And yeah, here I have method refresh media cache. So it uses the default Instagram client from this library. Where is it? Well, actually was constructed at the top with my credentials via OAuth. And yeah, so we have just a bunch of utils for getting recent media for a tag or for a user or just whatever the API exposes is pretty much reflected in this library. So it's pretty convenient. So yeah, what can I show based on that? Well, probably let's go again a little bit into configuration to understand what's the role of content connectors. In that case, I'm only defining it as its actual definition class, which just registers this the content connector implementation. But let's take a look at the contacts app, for example, to also show what is different here since what has changed between 5.2 and 5.3. So we have this content connector here, and you'll see now it hosts the JCR properties, because the content app is now pretty much JCR agnostic, so it's independent of JCR. And so you can plug, by default, it's a JCR content connector, which is this root path. You can specify the workspace or various kind of things, whereas in the workbench node only remains the configuration for the content use. That's pretty much it. Do I need to go through the app again? I don't think so.
No, I think we're fine.
In case you have questions or...
we take some at the end.
Yeah, well, anyway. So yeah, back to the presentation once more.
Okay, so we said that the photo scouts are going to look at photos and they make suggestions to photo editors. And we plan to use the Pulse for that, because Pulse is about me and my work, is about me getting notified about changes, about things I work on, about messages, etc. And if you think about workflow and Pulse, and if you have some experience with it in 5.2 and earlier versions, you might say, but you know what, in Pulse, I mean, work items just show up as a stream of messages and it's not really working so well. Good news is that we've done a lot of work for this in 5.3. We have changed, we have added a new tab on top, which is actually the default, which is called Tasks. It contains all the items that you are supposed to work on. So this is independent from workflow. The workflow module uses work items or exposes its work items using these type of tasks and shows them in the same list. But this is totally independent from it. It's actually available in CE already. You're using CE, right?
It is CE, yeah.
Okay. So tasks can be created and added by any type of module everywhere. And the difference between this type of list and the messages view is that this is actually showing the status of every item as well. So it shows, is it assigned to someone? Has it been completed already? You can see a number of filter tabs at the top that show you the new, the assigned, the resolved, and failed items. So we're going to use this type of task to send suggestions to photo editors. It's probably worth noting that tasks in Pulse also include group functionality, so you can send a specific task to a group of users, which then means that anyone in that group can assign a task to him or herself and then work on it. And the others can still see the status. So, okay, so a little bit more design. How am I going to add a task? Sounds like a simple thing, but it allows me to make a point here. This is the basic mock-up, so nothing spectacular. Basically, when I create on suggest photo, I just want to see a quick dialog that allows me to explain why I think this photo should make it into our digital asset management. The thing is, am I really going to use a regular dialog for this? Because this thing is heavy. It has a lot of chrome around it. And the thing with regular dialogues is actually that they've been designed to do editing tasks. So they accommodate complex fields. They especially darken the background, which means that they take away context. The idea of the dialogues has always been, the regular dialogues has always been that they focus you on editing whatever you're doing, which is not what we really want here, because we just want to create a quick task. And this is what light dialogues are for, which have been introduced in Magnolia 5.3 as well. Light dialogues work on a single focused task. So they look a lot slimmer. They have still a title, but in general Chrome is very reduced. And the idea is that you do not provide complex fields on this, although you could. but that you do simple things. Like here in this case, this has already been realized. If you rename a node name currently, you're no longer getting that heavy task that takes away even the tree from the background, but leaves everything visible. You have a similar dialog, a light dialog used by the move action. One thing we didn't have time to do, but which is coming up, is that every time somebody uses one of these chooser UIs provided by content apps, you're going to use a light dialog as well. And here you can see how they play well together with the regular dialogs on the background, where I do the content editing. We're also going to eventually provide a wide setting there, because standardized light dialogs are intentionally small, which allows me to make a key point also about regular dialogs in 5.3, because we have issues like this currently, right? The width is very reduced, which means that if you have complex fields like this one here, which is for building ACLs, the main part, the URI, is actually not visible. This is why we've introduced that little thingy there on the top right corner, the full screen button, which takes the dialog to the full width available and allows you to quickly toggle between the two. You can actually configure a dialog to be by default on a wide setting. So back to light dialogs. This is how I think we should create the dialog for, because it's just exactly what we need without the Chrome around it, just a light dialog. And Mika is going to show us it's actually quite easy.
Yep. So we'll go to the config once again. So down, gonna collapse now the browser sub and so, well, same as any other modules, we have dialog definitions. You should be pretty much familiar with that. In there, I just have a plain form definition with some fields and just a subject, which is a text area. So I have just this dialog definition. Yeah, what I forgot to show now. Yeah, so we have this new property here, which is called modality level, and we just set it to light, and that's basically it. So it just functions like any other dialog, has the same configuration mechanisms, has the same action mechanisms. Here, for the sake of completeness, I'm using a custom save action, so I can actually send the task to the task manager. We'll see how that looks in code in a minute. So that's it for the dialog. And yeah, now let's take a quick look at the tasks. So it consists essentially of two nodes. One is just the basic task definition. So this is a task definition. The name is very important here because that's the name you're going to use when creating the task in code. So I'm going to create a task, set the name to review, and within this task definition, I'm just defining which view I want to use in the pulse. So it's like a qualified name. You're probably familiar with this with the dialog references. It just points to the photo review module. That's the same module we're in. And references actually a message view. So we're pointing to that node here. Message views, they were already available previously. But well, now you're going to use them for something else than just messages. You're going to use them for tasks as well. So you define same thing as usual, a form in there. So I just have a couple of fields, the requester for the suggestion and the comment, and also which actions I want to see. Here we have four main actions which are of interest for handling tasks in the pulse. So we have provided tasks for assigning the task to yourself, or marking the task as resolved. You can also reject it, or you also have a task for an action for excuse me. It's an action for archiving a task. And well, I can also add another bunch of extra actions to operate on the task. So I also have like extra actions to open the photo in the app or on Instagram. And this is also structured visually by using an action bar definition. Here I just have a couple of groups. One to handle the task actions and one for the open photo actions. It's a bit crammed in there. Okay, so we'll go back to the app. So I'm still a photo scout in here. So yeah, I'm gonna suggest this great photo. So here's the light dialog. So just as simple as this. looks awesome. And well, it's a text area, but if it were a text input, I could use the keyboard shortcut Enter just to enter it. Okay.
You can tab through it.
Well, I can click here, that's no problem. So yeah, it tells me the suggestion has been sent to photo editor. So now I'm gonna go in Safari. Here I'm logged in as Andreas, being a photo editor. And yeah, it's gonna receive the task in the pulse now. So we have a new photo suggestion. You can see here we have a preview before the various subtabs for all the task categories. So we can double click this item. We see the form definition that we've configured for this message view. So it includes the requester, the scout, that was me, the comment. And yeah, we can decide to just assign the suggestion to myself, and I can decide whether I want to accept it, add to it to the assets, or reject it. I can also first preview it on Instagram because I actually haven't seen it yet. I think Safari is blocking pop-ups. That's nice.
Show the photo in the app, then it's fine.
Yeah, we can do that.
If that works. It's actually a good point, right? Because that's
Well,
a special type of action.
It's still on the Art Basel thingy in there, so
I see.
because it's not persisted. But well, let's do as if. So yeah, we got this task here, and yeah, we're gonna approve it. So we add photo to the assets. Didn't plan to actually implement that in the first place, but turns out I did. So
You did.
so yeah, here's the photo.
Okay.
It's in assets now, and
I
we can
know
see the
this.
suggestion has been imported into the DAM. That's it. Anything else? I think we can go back to presentation. So yeah, basically you've seen the Photo Scout app. You've seen ways to have an app to view photos that are stored on Instagram, access them, configure how we want to access them. Yes, like whether we want to use tag or user, well, just configure whatever we provide for the content connector. And you've seen how to handle the suggestions in the Pulse for photo editors, or how to handle tasks between various groups of users.
So you've seen a couple of new features in 5.3. There are more actually, but content connectors for content apps are clearly killer for me. I mean, because finally we can access all kinds of web services and still provide the same experience for the users without them actually needing to know a lot. Handling tasks in Pulse, finally done in a good way. Open location action is the thing that you've would have seen if we had configured it correctly. The thing is there, you can have an action that opens an app, and inside that app maybe a sub-app, and inside that sub-app select an item.
Well, you've seen it in action, actually. When I show on photo, it's just that was no longer on the same photo feed. But
yeah, we were on a different feed.
we were actually going to that app with the selected ID.
You've also seen the light dialogues, and I've demonstrated you a couple of these guidelines. So the idea there, again, is to have a recognizable, a consistent experience across apps in general, and to ensure that your apps work well with others. There are actually many improvements on the UI level. You've seen the white regular dialogues quickly. You might have noticed, for some of you who have experience with older versions of Magnolia 5, that alerts and notifications have been visually clarified. But we have also added keyboard support everywhere, so you can tab through all types of buttons, and we have a proper focus indicator. Actually something that you would expect from the start, but it's always difficult to get everything together. So that's basically what we wanted to show you. A little bit of design, a little bit of build, and now we're open to questions if you have any.
Otherwise, yeah.
All right.
Thank you then.
Thanks a lot.